Mm. Good afternoon and welcome to the second session of the series that is developing entrepreneurial education program for higher education institutions and universities. I'm really happy to welcome you all to the second of my presentation in this series. In the first presentation, where we have talked about the designing of entrepreneurship development program for the higher education institutions and universities, we've realized that something has to, as far as the framework for the entrepreneurship development program is concerned, we need to first very carefully select the definition of entrepreneurship and try to internalize and institutionalize the concept of entrepreneurial thinking from the top of the leadership, from the top leadership across the entire organization and these universities and the institutions. Allow me to please share my screen so that we can, proceed with the presentation. So this brings me to the second in the series of which talks about designing entrepreneurship development program for the higher education institutions and the universities. In the first part, we have identified the problem, or rather say we can say that we have discussed certain issues which these universities and higher education institutions are facing. We have identified the reason why the entrepreneurial initiatives and projects are reported less from these institutions, despite there is the entire entrepreneurial ecosystem and the support system from the government, as well as policies, procedures, and monetary budgetary allocations. Everything is in place, but still things are not happening. So we need to now look into the careful aspect of designing. In the first presentation, I've talked about that scientific literature talks about the four entrepreneurship education paradigm, which says that educating students for creating new ventures, educating students for transforming innovative ideas for economic growth, and educating students to use entrepreneurship for social change, and educating students for developing entrepreneurial mindset. Now, these are the four paradigms in which the entire entrepreneurship education can be broadly classified. So as of now, if you look into it, most of the universities are focusing on the 1, 2, and 3, first, second, and third paradigms. And rather, I would say that they're focused only on first part, which is educating students for creating the new ventures. And I have already spoken about it, that our ability to embrace entrepreneurship is very, very limited by the way we define it. So how you define your entrepreneurial initiatives and the program will categorically, help you in, implementing your development program. I have already mentioned that earlier that scientific community, there is no commonly accepted definitions. The concepts overlap each other. And so it is essential that the definition of, or the approach towards entrepreneurship development has to be taken up by these institutions or decided by these institutions beforehand. I have already mentioned about these two schools of thought. One by Turgot and Say, which talks about business new venture creation, and follow the sociological and economic theories of entrepreneurship. And the second, which is by Cantillon and Schumpeters, they consider entrepreneur as a creative innovator and follow the psychological theories of entrepreneurship. So a narrow definition of entrepreneurship contemplates entrepreneurship education as business development. I've spoken about this point where the focus is on becoming an entrepreneur. It's a very constructive approach, constructivist approach. And the wider definition or expansive definition of entrepreneurship contemplates entrepreneurship education as a personal development, initiative taking, action orientation. It's more focused on becoming an entrepreneur. The first one is an actor, which is becoming an entrepreneur, and the second is entrepreneurial, which is a behavior. It is at this point of time, I think I wanted to, talk about mapping entrepreneurial education programs with the entrepreneurship approaches or the theories, you can say. So if an organization or an higher education institution focuses, their entire entrepreneurial education program for creating new ventures, then the focus is on business development, self-employment, venture creation, growth, and on becoming an entrepreneur. And they will follow the social and economic theories of entrepreneurship. if again they follow, if they're trying to teach their students or train their students in entrepreneurship development for transforming their innovative ideas for economic growth, then again the focus will be on business development, self-employment, venture creation, growth. That's again on becoming an entrepreneur. And again, in the second paradigm, or the also follows the social and economic theories of entrepreneurship. Third, if these higher education institutions are trying to educate students to use entrepreneurship for social change, and the focus is on business development, employment, venture creation, growth, and again on becoming the entrepreneur. They also follow the social and economic theories of entrepreneurship. But if they train their students for developing entrepreneurial mindset, then the focus is on personal development, creativity, self-reliance, initiative taking, action orientation, that is in becoming an entrepreneur. And this is not social and economical theory of entrepreneurship contemplates. So basically, when you are training you're educating your students for developing entrepreneurial mindset, you are following psychological theories of entrepreneurship. So if you map entrepreneurial education paradigms and the teaching pedagogy, you will find that when I am trying to train my students for creating new ventures, then my entire efforts in teaching is focused on aspects of what is business planning, what is business model canvas, what is business resource planning. I'll be talking more about funding, incubation, and startup, etc. Similarly, if these institutions are trying to educate students for transforming innovative ideas for economic growth, then the teaching will be focused on various aspects of government support and schemes which are available, business model, revenue model. They'll be focused more on costing, funding, and supply chain and scaling. And these are the things I'm trying to put across so that you can understand. The moment you change the definition of entrepreneurship or your approach towards entrepreneurship, your teaching style and the teaching pedagogy and the content changes drastically. Similarly, if these higher education institutions are educating students to use entrepreneurship for social change, then in that case, obviously, teaching will be focused on various aspects of emerging trends like green entrepreneurship, sustainable entrepreneurship, circular entrepreneurship, lean entrepreneurship, and obviously the crowdfunding. These are the terms which I don't want to explain it over here, but the point which I'm trying to highlight is that a lot of entrepreneurship development efforts depend on the way we approach the entrepreneurship programs. If these higher education institutions are training or educating students for developing entrepreneurial mindset, then then your teaching efforts will be mainly focused on the behavioral competencies and life skills, mindset, attitude, and transversal and global skills. Now, that's how you can see the difference goes across the paradigms. Again, I'll repeat the same slide because it's an important. Our ability to embrace entrepreneurship is limited by the way we define it. So to put it more precisely, I have tried to, broadly match the entrepreneurial education paradigms and the teachings. So as per the first paradigm, when you are trying to educate students for creating new ventures, your teaching for new venture creation primarily will be focused on business and financial planning, business modeling canvas, business strategies and revenue model, entrepreneurial ecosystem, startup and incubation, seed money and funding. Now here the focus is primarily in making a student to become an entrepreneur. Now you understand that if your agenda and your idea is to teach students to start or to create a new venture, you will definitely be including the various some of these important aspects in your teaching or in your curriculum. Similarly, if you are educating students for transforming innovative ideas for economic growth, then your teaching will be primarily focused on innovation and creativity. You'll be talking more of design thinking, business model canvas. You'll be talking about business strategies, revenue model. You will definitely look forward for the government funding schemes and assistance is available to start or create venture. You will be more concerned about entrepreneurial ecosystem and capacity building, and you'll be teaching them about the network effects and the profitability. Again, these are also important aspects, and here you are trying to make students in becoming an entrepreneur again. If you follow the third paradigm, if the higher education institutions try to follow the third paradigm, where they are educating students to use entrepreneurship for social change, then you will find that the teaching is more concerned with the social trends and the emerging business models. Now, here you will be very, very social concerned in the sense that you want to bring about a social change in the society through your efforts in creating business, right? So you'll be more concerned in your curriculum. You'll be talking about all the latest development trends, that is green, sustainable, circular, lean entrepreneurship. You'll be again focusing on business modeling with reference to NGOs. You talk about the crowdfunding, because you're involving people. You'll be talking again about entrepreneurial ecosystem and capacity building, and last but not the least, the financial planning. Here again, the focus is on making a student to become an entrepreneur. But when higher education institutions are following entrepreneurship education and for developing the entrepreneurial mindset, then the teaching efforts are focused on psychological and behavioral conditioning. Now, these are difficult aspects: psychological competencies and attitude, entrepreneurial mindset, attitude and growth mindset, how to think and act like an entrepreneur, personal development and entrepreneurial skill, and capacity for entrepreneurial action. Now, here the focus of the teaching is in making students and becoming an entrepreneur. Now, this is what exactly I wanted to talk about. Since becoming an entrepreneur, training to become an entrepreneur is easier as compared to training students to develop and become an entrepreneurial. Now, one is very short. Becoming an entrepreneur will produce short-term results, but becoming developing an entrepreneurial mindset will produce a long-term result. Just like our Prime Minister has started the initiative of Swachh Bharat. This is basically a type of psychological or behavioral changes. Without knowing the people at large, he has initiated a program, and it's quite successful in changing the mindset of people towards their health consciousness and cleanliness. Similarly, if higher education institutions are dealing with those who are dealing with the students, they are known to them and they're very limited in number. So in that case, if they focus on developing students' entrepreneurial mindset, the results will be much beneficial. And I think in my first presentation, I have spoken about that IITs and IIMs, they internalize and institutionalize this entrepreneurial thinking in their various courses across all the discipline, and that's why majority of the projects which are there, which India is producing, are coming from the top 20 institutions across the country. So if you put map all these entrepreneurship programs, you will find that most of the higher education institutions are starting from either they're educating students for creating new ventures, not either, mostly. Some of them are thinking graduating to the next level. They're also including that they're training students for transforming innovative ideas for economic growth. And some of them are also talking in terms of social change. And they're not giving any consideration to the fact that they should train students for developing the entrepreneurial mindset. However, as per the scientific community and the scientific research that I've gone through, if the higher education institutions and universities start educating students for developing entrepreneurial mindset, then the rest of the three, that is educating students for creating new ventures, educating students for economic growth, and for entrepreneurship for social change, will automatically follow. They need not to put an extra effort onto it, because when you talk about entrepreneurial mindset, it's basically talking about how can you become proactive, how can you innovate, how can you be innovative in problem solving, and how do you take risk, and how do you handle your uncertainty situations. So as I've earlier also spoken, I shall not read this slide. These are some inferences from the scientific literature about the entrepreneurial mindset. So now I'm talking about, as I have mentioned also, if you look at the report of Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, they've spoken about in the report Future of Education and Skill. They've talked about the significance of the cognitive skills, that is critical thinking, learning to learn, risk-taking abilities, proactiveness, and self-regulation, and that they are going to play a major role. And you'll be surprised that in a study which was conducted by Cormorant in 2017, the attributes of entrepreneurial mindset and thinking exactly matches these cognitive skills, that is persistence, risk orientation, proactiveness, innovativeness, self-efficacy, that is self-belief and confidence, creativity and imagination. So which means that not only for developing the entrepreneurial initiatives and the projects, Entrepreneurial mindset and entrepreneurial thinking, in a way, is going to become a life skill for the future, which we need to focus on. So, entrepreneur development program, certain designing propositions I would like to highlight once again. We need to shift focus from content and knowledge. So, because when we are talking about the venture creation, we are talking about what is business model canvas, what is business planning, what is business plan. They are important, but it all starts with the idea generation and the opportunity identification. So, when I've spoken to several of the entrepreneurs, I myself being an entrepreneur in the initial stages of my career. What I found is that when they start their entrepreneurial journey, they never thought of what will be the business plan like, and they're mainly focused on what the idea is all about. How do they come up with an idea or an opportunity on which they wanted to work and to make it a viable business solution, right? So content is important, but if you change the behavior of the student, then the knowledge and the content becomes integral or gets integrated with the thinking itself. Now, consider Entrepreneurship Development Program as a life skill development program. As I mentioned, that Organization for Economic Change and Cooperation, in the report they mentioned the certain skills which are going to be there required for in the future, and fortunately all those skills were integral part of the entrepreneurial thinking. So in a way we can put it this way, that entrepreneurial thinking are more or less like life skill development program, and they should be taken more seriously. We shift focus from to long-term results, that is in a behavioral change. As I said, venture creation will produce results, but they're not going to be sustainable, or may not be sustainable. But if you're trying to bring about a behavioral change, they become sustainable. Focus on becoming entrepreneurial, not on entrepreneur. So the entrepreneurial teaching, pedagogy, and assessment should be built on the core characteristic of psychological theory of learning and development, as IITs and IIMs are following, because it helps in nurturing the personal development of imaginative abilities, entrepreneurial competencies, and capacity for entrepreneurial action. Next, it is very essential that entrepreneurial education should not be treated as subject of learning, but it should also be treated as a method of learning. That is, one of the skills which is required, that is learning to learn. So learning to learn talks about that, how can I understand about my learning needs and find out opportunities of learning, and under the guidance of my mentorship and coaching programs, right? So recognize the entrepreneurial thinking as a teachable framework. This is again an important aspect. Most of the people think that entrepreneurial thinking cannot be taught, but the scientific research community has proved it with the research that yes, it is a teachable frame. So again, we've come down to the end of this second presentation, that we should stop asking students what they want to be. So rather, firstly, we should understand what problem they're trying to solve, and based on those problems, we should come up with this. We should individualize and customize the teaching, curriculum, and so that they should be able to solve their problem. So Entrepreneurship Development Program design should set the teaching tone, the content, pedagogy, and assessment, and above all, the delivery. Now, again, Entrepreneurship Development Program designing should be done from the perspective that what is the definition of entrepreneurship we are going to pursue. If the higher education institution has internalized and institutionalized the philosophy or the paradigm of creating only new ventures, then the designing of the curriculum and the teaching, the method, the tone, and the pedagogy and the delivery, everything differs. If you have thought of trying to develop, if your entrepreneurship development program focuses in developing entrepreneurial mindset of the students, then absolutely different approaches follow, because unless and until we define our direction, it is pointless. Where are we going, right? So with this, I conclude my presentation. And in the third part, I'll be talking about, I'm not talking about the content of the Entrepreneurship Development Program. I have broadly divided into 4 or 5 phases of, teaching phases, and I have given name to them, those phases. And inside those phases, you're free to put across your curriculum requirement and accordingly develop the program. Thank you once again. I hope you enjoyed the presentation as much as I did while I was presenting it. Because of the shortage of time, I was, rushing the presentation, and I think you'll be able to, navigate the presentation again, and find it more meaningful. Thank you very much for your time and attention. And that's it. Bye. Take care.